A lot of talk.
You ready? We'll get started.
Okay. Not as many as I used to. I've got 12 and 15-year-old girls, so they're involved in a lot of things.
Thank you for coming to On the Menu. Today, we are really excited to have you, whether you're joining us in person or online. Thank you for taking the time to learn about entrepreneurship with us today. Frontier RGP has events all the time, free events just like this one. But in addition to On the Menu that happens monthly, we also have yoga that happens in the atrium, and that happens every Tuesday. Our next On the Menu will take place on April 17th, and that is in preparation for our big annual career fair. So if you hear last year, you know, we had a large 500-person plus career fair. We had companies from all over RTP, and so we're really excited to bring that back and make it even better for this year. So in preparation for that, our next On the Menu will be focused on helping you get career fair ready. So that information is available online and tickets are already available. So go ahead and reserve your seat. But today we are joined by Stearns, who is the author of Ninja Entrepreneurship, which you should see on your tables as he brought a free book today. But we will let him speak more about how to be an awesome ninja entrepreneur.
Thank you. Thank you. Great to be here. So I've got a construct for today, but it's really about you, and it's about what your expectations are to get out of this. So if we could do a lightning round, and I do mean a lightning round, because with this size group, we could take half our time if you go into detail on what's the one thing you want to get out of this. So if you can do it in a couple of words or a sentence, that would be great. Go. How to grow a business from the ground up. Okay.
Just learn stuff and see what I can learn from it.
Okay. Learning, growing, and learning. Okay, we're done for today. That will take up the hour.
Just insight into being a better entrepreneur in this changing market.
Better entrepreneur, changing market. Okay.
Just learning more about entrepreneurship.
Okay, so kind of general entrepreneurship.
Networking in businesses.
Okay. Yeah.
For me, with the word sustainable, I think that was in the title.
Yep.
Yeah, that was intriguing.
Okay, you were intrigued by my marketing idea. Sustainable. Good job, by the way. Yep.
To get more customers.
More customers, okay. Okay, growing could be more customers. But are they the right customers? Yeah.
Managing complexity.
Complexity? Okay. What do you mean by
I think learning, I think that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Because I'm going to talk today about, who here knows the term VUCA? Yeah, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. How is that for a mouthful? Well, there's actually a VUCA index, and that index is hitting almost the same high as it did in 08-09. Anybody remember 08-09? Tough economic times? Well, that's not exactly today. So you can have unusual things happen in different economic environments. Yep. Doing everything with a one-man show. Okay. And your time has come, by the way. Now let's call it a one-person show.
What do you mean when you say your time has come?
Sorry?
Just curious, when you say your time has come, what do you mean?
Well, so sorry. I'm not talking into the microphone enough. So if there ever was a time in history of being able to leverage yourself, one of the things we talk about in the book is the ninja multiplier effect. And that ability to leverage yourself has never been greater. Now, 5 years from now, I suspect it'll be even better. But there's just so many opportunities. I mean, augmented intelligence is one of those 1 + 1 = 3 pieces, kind of the next generation of artificial intelligence. Okay, yes. Okay. Corporate or LLC? Yes.
Launching an online store for a currently small venture.
Okay. So e-commerce for something small.
So, having the site, operate the site, paying the Shopify subscription versus how much I'm actually selling, which is a small amount, but it's like you have to spend money to earn money kind of thing.
Right. Well, at least you're not like some folks in rooms like this that I've been in where they were building their own several years ago. And it like took them longer to build it and they almost went out of business before they were able to build it. So at least you're leveraging off a good platform. Oops, we are running out of ink here. Okay, did you have one on the,
And then honing my presentation and closing skills as I'm newly in leadership.
okay. So another networking and closing skills, but that was around leadership within the organization or with customers?
Wanted to hone that the presentation and closing skills.
Got it. Okay, so closing, but leadership. Okay. Anybody else have one they want to add? Yeah.
I got to think about barriers to entry, the whole concept, and it's like, how do you get past it? Basically, because most barrier to entry is barrier of lead to entry, and I want to get past barrier to entry somehow.
Get past barriers to entry. Okay. Okay. Yes.
For companies, they are struggling to import raw materials from other countries.
Okay. Phrase that differently.
So where is getting higher? How the terms supply.
Okay. Depends on what day of the week you're on. I mean, what tariffs you've got. Okay. I know what that means.
Ninja fighting skills, like just the guy to teach us. Actually, building trust. Building trust in businesses, how to do that.
Okay. Building trust with who?
Building trust with clients and colleagues, like what is the psychology and the behavior economics behind them?
Ooh, behavior. Yeah, all right. Thanks. Yes.
Exponential growth with the current scenario for AI, ChatGPT, so many devices are here. How do we do the exponential growth? Do we travel with that or do we face against it?
Okay. How much time do we have? All right. Any others? Yes. Ooh, okay. Of course, the prevailing wisdom is that you should find a niche. And I actually have seen in the 120 companies that we interviewed for Ninja Entrepreneurs, there were some that are just darn good generalists. So the answer is maybe it depends. I tend to like the niche piece, especially in the current environment. Yeah.
Again, for the networking, but for targeted networking, how do you specifically target for a certain type of business?
Okay. Again, your time has come. It's my view that these are the best of times and the worst of times for entrepreneurs. So we have more tools than we've ever had before to start businesses, to leverage ourselves, to do all sorts of things. Having more choices isn't always a good thing. In fact, there have been a lot of behavioral studies, the person who talked about behavioral, about the fact that you got more and more choices, and all of a sudden our brain starts to go, oh, too many choices. Okay, anything you don't see up there? Hot burning issue? Yes.
Effective use of time and energy.
Effective use of time and energy. All right. But isn't that unlimited? And it's interesting you use the word effective instead of efficient. And that was one of the findings in our ninja piece, is knowing the difference between those two. The top ninjas knew the difference between effective and efficient and figured out how to balance that. Yeah. Yeah.
So I saw that you're CFP, and so thinking about the word sustainable, something I also am in the process of is figuring out like how to, for like tracking finances and business expenditures, like to kind of like using QuickBooks or just using a Google sheet, just kind of like just how far to, I guess, how much to invest in the financial organization process.
Okay.
You know, like is it just back of the napkin, or is it like, okay, I'm actually gonna sign up for QuickBooks?
Yeah, so let's call that infrastructure. Okay. Are we good? Anybody got something hot? You want to add to that? All right. That's a good list. And when we started this process of interviewing 120 companies, the pandemic was just getting cranked up. So it was a really interesting time to interview a lot of these leaders of private companies and talk to them about what were they doing right, what were they doing wrong. And again, maybe it would surprise you that the vast majority of those leaders, they're confident, but they were a bit confused at the time because they were in again, a VUCA, an uncertainty and complexity environment. And that was before we knew for sure that we were going to have a vaccine or that we were even going to have things open, depending on what type of business you have, whether it mattered or not. And, all the experts were saying, oh, it could be 4 or 5 years. Well, what do you do in the meantime? One of the ones that we interviewed for the book was right in the middle of pivoting their entire national business model. And they were 95% in person doing training on sales growth. So they would go to private and public companies and train on how to grow your sales. And they were pivoting to 95% in Zoom or virtual environment. And man, that was a tough pivot for them. And so one of the things that I want you to all take away, and it's in one of the chapters in Ninja, is that pivoting skills and adapting skills are number one as you're growing a business. So, you know, how do you grow exponentially? Well, whatever growth rate you're at, this environment that we're coming up to the next 5 or 10 years is going to be change unlike anything we've seen before. And I'm not talking here about Musk and Trump. I mean, that's thrown another boomerang into the mix, but it's the techno-industrial revolution. And it is accelerating at an accelerating rate. And, you know, just the other day, we do a lot of multi-generational work with our clients. And one of the grandchildren of one of our clients was looking at a career in architecture. And she was actually looking at a number of colleges to get her master's degree in architecture. And so you look out into the future, there's a lot of things to be worried about if you're an architect. If you're well established, your ability to use technology to leverage yourself is great. If you're not well established, if you're one of the lower 20% of the employees, your ability to find yourself looking for a new job is pretty high in the next 5 to 10 years. And so the thing that was critical for her, and I think the thing that's critical for entrepreneurs, is to take a real honest assessment of yourself and the people you've surrounded yourself with. What are our skills in being able to adapt? Now, every business in this room, well, first of all, let me ask, how many are within the first 2 years of starting a business? Okay, maybe a third of the room. How many are 2 to 5 years? Okay, another group, 5+ years. You want the 10+ category? 20 plus? 15, okay. All right. And how many are wannabe entrepreneurs? You're trying to figure out how to do it. Okay. You raised your hand twice.
Yeah, but there's like different levels of like how much time you're putting into it over those 4 years.
Ah, yes, very good. And so one of the things that, again, was not a particular surprise in the interviews we did with entrepreneurs is that the vast majority of them, every iteration of their business, you know, as they went from small to a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger, and medium size, and some of them big, their skill sets had to shift along the way. And to the extent they didn't shift, they ran into trouble. And a lot of times they ran into trouble because they had not surrounded themselves with the right people. So we're going to get into that right people piece. Here's the construct that's the easy construct of what is Ninja Entrepreneurs all about. Number one, finding big ideas. That lead to customer joy and employee joy. And by the way, the current statistics of employee joy in the world at large are really not good. And so again, depending on how many people you have in your organization, there's a lot of companies that are like, I'm not sure I want to know the answer to that. But many of them are starting to really dig in and find out, okay, how happy are you really? And there is a massive move in our country right now of people who are really not happy. I mean, the big move first was, of course, in the pandemic. And people had maybe too much time on their hands at times to sit around and go, ooh, I don't really like my job. But then there was kind of a period of adjustment post-pandemic. And now we're seeing this shift, and this is public companies and private companies. And so this employee joy piece is challenging for a lot of companies. Then you get to the 4 pieces that are on the front of the Ninja book. And those 4 key pieces are talent. And I'm going to reorder them a little bit from what's on there. Talent, leadership, technology, and speed. So those were the 4 areas that, as we spent a couple years digesting all this information about these companies, and by the way, number 99 on the 120 list is a pretty darn good company, pretty good sales growth, pretty good profitability growth. They didn't make it into the top 10 or top 25% of ninjas, but they're pretty good. So the question is, what actually made somebody who was really good? And that is that every big idea drove to those 2 items predominantly, that then drove to the filter of these 4 items: talent, leadership, technology, and speed. So entrepreneurs, it's sort of a saying out there that entrepreneurs have a short attention span. I won't ask for a show of hands how many of you have ADHD, but a lot of entrepreneurs actually do. And, just like a lot of pretty famous people in history have turned some of those things into ways to make it their superpower, in many cases, our top ninjas have turned what could have been something that, would have knocked them out of a Fortune 50 company, turned it into a superpower, being an entrepreneur. But the problem with the coming up with ideas all the time is that you come up with a gazillion ideas and you drive yourself crazy, or you drive the people around you crazy. And so at some point, there's a filtering process that has to go on where you have to say, okay, I was just at a meeting or a conference or something else, and 3 great ideas. I'm going to come in and if I have 3 leaders in my company, I'm going to, or yourself when you're having a cup of coffee, I'm going to see if those 3 ideas, if I can incorporate them in my business. And it's kind of the knee-jerk, moving around and not staying focused on the final goal. But there's a balance point there. And again, our ninjas, and this is something some of you may have read in my bio, I'm a chess master, played on very winning Pan American chess team. And one of the things that we learned as the higher level of chess is that every game there was one idea that might turn the game. Now, there's all kinds of points. I mean, every move you make in chess, the position changes, and it's another 100,000 variables that you're looking at. But there's one theme or one idea that generally changes the nature of the game. And that was one of the things we found in our top ninjas, is that they had figured out how to filter these ideas. So for those of you who are in the earlier stages of business, very critical that you hire the right people. I know this is in the duh category, that you find the right people to surround yourself with, but entrepreneurs everywhere struggle with the issue of who can I afford? So they don't always hire the people that are, at their level for their first 3 or first 5 or first 10 employees. And so you almost, that old bootstrapping thing of you're taking very small amounts of money and you're trying to make it all work and trying to avoid running up credit card debt and going bankrupt and all the other fun stuff that entrepreneurs face sometimes. You're trying to figure out how can I afford somebody better so that it's not just my own echo chamber? Today, your own echo chamber is a very dangerous thing because, again, in a time of high VUCA, you know, I don't care if you're a chess grandmaster or if you're somebody who is highly disciplined. We got stuff coming at us every day now that is incredible and unprecedented and can create all kinds of future scenarios. You know, we're known as one of the top scenario firms in the country. Scenarios are us. And the key is that you got to create good scenarios, reasonable scenarios. And when you got variables that are shooting up like that, it is more difficult to do that as an owner. And so the default often is, yeah, okay, I'm just going to keep kind of same old, doing what I'm doing for the next week that follows the next week, that follows the next month. And again, the tyranny of the urgent overtakes a lot of entrepreneurs. You know, they got this fire drill and that fire drill, and, you know, God forbid you're trying to actually balance family with all of this. And in the middle of all that, it is really hard to transform your airplane into a jet while you're flying. And the top ninjas that we researched, they did that better than anybody else. But they didn't do it alone. They did it with being surrounded by the right people. Now, sometimes you have to convince somebody that they should join up with you, even though you might be paying them 30% less, 50% less than they're making in some, you know, normal job. Oh, let's see, I should take a third to a half haircut on my pay with less benefits and more risk. And if they're married, good luck selling that at home, depending again on the family situation. But again, a lot of those ninjas figured out ways to sell people on their dream and attract good people and cut them in on it as the business grew, whether it's normal compensation or options or stock or whatever. And so again, that was one of the distinguishing pieces of the top ninjas. The customer joy piece, to a certain extent, has always been true. Why is it more difficult today to create customer joy? Anybody?
Expectations are higher, while patience is lower.
Expectations higher, patience is lower. Very good. Yeah. In fact, we quote some of the statistics in the book about the number of angry people in, you know, connecting to either retailers or other kinds of things. I mean, it's shot up like that. And so the bar has been raised. What was one of the inflection points that raised the bar? What created those higher expectations?
I would say social media.
Social media. Very good. Very good. So I was brought into a think tank. And again, let's see, this is being recorded and streamed out. So what can I share about this story? So this is Walmart creating a think tank because they're concerned about Amazon taking business away from small businesses in towns across America. Now let's think about that for a second. Who did that first? Walmart. Yes, I probably won't be invited back now to any of those events. But Amazon came up with a way to, I guess, gig the customer at a higher level and at a more intense level. And so customers now have more power to shop than ever before. And not just shop prices, shop satisfaction ratings. And if you think it's bad or weird right now. Well, this time we're coming into with, the next generations beyond generative and augmented intelligence, all the stuff that's coming after is going to make it even more of a confusing scene, whether you're B2C, business to consumer, or B2B, business to business. And so keeping your customers at a high level of joy is not an easy prospect. And I will tell you that our top 10 ninjas out of the 120, they have a relentless weekly focus on being close to their customers as they grow. It is so easy, whoever was talking about exponential growth, depending on how fast your growth rate is and how many more customers you're getting, it is so easy to kind of get disconnected from the people that got you where you were a year ago or 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Or as you hire more people, the messages get more filtered, and you as the leader or part of a leadership team, you get filtered messages as well. Very dangerous. And we have a whole section in the book on the danger of filtered messages. So this book, again, was over 600 pages long. We cut 2/3 of it, hit the cutting room floor. My baby hit the cutting room floor, but it needed to happen to make it a readable book. And so the essence of some of the stories, we skinnied down a few stories that were 3 and 4 pages long. So we've still got texture, we still have depth, but we've gotten it down to a point where you're not starting to, nod off as you're as you're reading the story. And the stories about how do we connect better with customers are just priceless. And it's one of the things I love about entrepreneurs, particularly the ones who get it right. We have the story in here of a more traditional logistics company, and they had been trying to get Starbucks as a client. And so they tried and they, again, Entrepreneur 101, you go at it from 18 different directions, and every time they failed. But they dusted themselves off and went back into the fight, and they finally got an interview, but it was a very tentative interview with one of the execs at Starbucks headquarters in Seattle. So they get into the reception room, and the reception room at headquarters, they actually have a Starbucks there where you can order coffee and do other things. And they got in, and it was very clear that there was some kind of issue going on today with Starbucks. There was some kind of fire drill happening, and they're in like uh-oh, we've traveled all the way out here, and we may get rescheduled, or who knows if we could get rescheduled. And so they just sat themselves down, even though the receptionist kept saying, well, I'm not sure when he'll be ready to see you. They just said, oh, we're in no hurry. We're going to sit here. And they just sat themselves down and waited it out. And they finally got just a few minutes with him. And those 2 individuals from that company made the most of their very few minutes. And that's another piece that I think is critical when you talk about the top ninjas, is the sales skills. Somebody talked about closing, closing skills. The sales skills of the founder, generally, back in the old days, most founders had pretty good sales skills. Well, now people starting their own businesses for a whole variety of reasons, they think there's a better way it can be done. They want to be their own boss. They think maybe they'll get more time flexibility. Aha. Maybe that's 10 years down the road, you'll get more time flexibility. Or whatever the reasons, the fact is that most businesses really need intensive work, and it can't always be you or the founder. And so the closer, maybe it's not you. And, we just had a really important thing happen with a company. So our wealth management arm manages over $2 billion, and we do a lot in venture capital. And one of our major investments is in a medical space company in Chicago. And the founder of that and the early CEO, very good. I mean, give him A's across the board for everything he did to get it up to a certain level. But then it was clear this guy doesn't know how to manage a growing team. And the types of entities that he closed early on, now he's dealing with an entirely different and larger type of entity. To his credit, he figured this out before us or the board said, excuse me, you need to rotate your role. And so he came to us and said, I want to hire a professional CEO, and I want to go back to what I'm really best at, which is R&D, research and development. And boy, I give him an A+ for that, because for every one of those, there's 100 because of ego or whatever that they don't do that. It often does not turn out well. So again, this kind of gets back to, all right, if I want to stay lean and I don't want to manage 20 people or whatever, what do? Hey, the fractional economy is more robust than it's ever been. We have several companies that we work with that have fractional everything. I mean, you can have fractional salespeople. You can have fractional CEOs. I'm still a little bit wary of that, but I'm seeing it work in a few cases. And you can have fractional everything. So you can buy a piece of a more skilled person, not have all of it on your P&L, and it can be an effective way to leverage the business until you have sales and profitability to afford somebody half-time, full-time, whatever. Yeah. Expand on the term fractional. So somebody who might only be working for you 1 day a week. Yeah, in the old days, we call them part-timers. Today, the fancy term is fractional. Yeah. Yeah. And so again, this is one of those buyer beware things that we see a lot of fractional people out there that we're like, okay, they're maybe mediocre as a full-time employee, which is probably the reason they went into being a fractional. And so again, you have to really take some strong measures of interviewing, just like you would if you were hiring one of your key people. So let's get into that piece about talent. And there's a chicken and an egg thing here of, if I get the right talent, I have a better chance of employee joy, as opposed to just getting anybody as talent and hoping to make them joyful. So this was an interesting little aha, and in some of the research we were doing, and I've seen this happen myself in other companies that I'm involved with. And the talent piece, what's the old thing about hiring? You've heard the phrase, you hire slowly and you fire quickly. What do most people do? Fire everybody. Yeah, good one. Yeah, they hire quickly because, oh, we've got this need. And they didn't try to hire ahead of the curve because, again, maybe their profits were lean, or for a whole variety of reasons, they don't hire ahead of the curve. And so they wait until it's a more critical item and they get somebody who looks like they might be the right choice. And maybe there's a few yellow flags in there, but they go ahead with it anyway. And again, the top ninjas, I will tell you that they have become very good at talent management. Now, there are many entrepreneurial podcasts out there, and I've been on the tour lately getting interviewed for Ninja by a number of those podcasts. And I will tell you, there are more flavors of podcasts than I even knew existed, and people who are doing the interviewing. But one that was pretty interesting that I did recently was a podcast called Braving Business. And there's two guys who, you would think you're on an ESPN sports show, kind of, jawboning back and forth. And then they kind of worked me into the whole discussion. And we had a whole segment in the hour interview on interviewing, hiring, and getting down really to the texture and pavement level of what questions are you asking people? And are you bringing enough of the right people into the mix? So, is it just you doing the interviewing? Is it somebody who has a different perspective? Maybe they have a more finely honed BS meter than you have, or maybe they have a different kind of BS meter. That's my favorite. I always try to get 3 different kinds of BS meters before we hire anybody in the room. Doesn't mean we get it 100% right, but it has certainly increased our success ratio. And so one of the other things, if you Google dig your well before, anybody want to finish that? Before you die. Okay, that's a good one, but no. Before you're thirsty. Dig your well before you.
Well,
Yeah, that's the entrepreneurial mind, just combining different things. And, we could have a brainstorming session and come up with something completely different. Dig your well before you're thirsty. Yes, which is one of my longtime mantras. And if you actually Google Braving Business, dig your well before you're thirsty, you will see a blog that I did on that topic in January. And it has kind of okay, what are the things I learned in chess? How did I adapt them to my business? And then how do I see it play out for the ninjas? And it's as concise 2-pager as I could get of all those things kind of mushed together. Okay, so talent, we have some quotes in the book from a guy named Chris Zarnek, who is how many here know Vistage, the roundtables for business? Okay, so Vistage, when you get probably a bit bigger, you have an opportunity to join a Vistage group, and they're usually a group of non-competitive business owners, and they sit around every month, share everything. It's kind of an emotional support group, or what's the hot issue of the day? I've got to fire somebody. How do I do it without getting sued? All those kinds of things. Well, the global head of Vistage Talent is Chris Zarnek, who is talked about in the book, and we do a lot of work with Chris. And one of the things Chris says is that most of the hiring in private businesses today, and a lot of public companies, but private business today, hiring is done the same way it was done 10, 15, 20 years ago, under an assumption that the potential employee actually needs you more than you need them. In other words, there's a line of people out there who are saying, I just can't wait to work for Sarah. And okay, once upon a time, that was a nice thing to have. It's not where we are today. And so there's a whole different way that you have to go out there and beat the bushes and try to find the right people. Okay, some advanced technology tools like Indeed, helpful, but there's a lot of other things that you can do, including networking, expanding, figuring out crystal clear what is the person I want to add, and then going to the places where those fish swim. And again, you might have to kiss 25 frogs to find the one that you really want. But the fact of the matter is, it gets back to if you can build that talent pool brick by intelligent brick, not just brick by brick, but intelligent brick, you have a better chance of getting the right people, creating employee joy, and getting the right people that can help you figure stuff out. Because again, adapt and pivot. One of the most difficult things in the techno-industrial revolution is figuring out when to pivot. Now, adapting, entrepreneurs do that generally every day, maybe every week, but a major pivot in the business is challenging, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Now, the mantra of a lot of our ninja entrepreneurs is if it ain't broke, break it, fix it better. Yeah. So again, one of those things where a different mindset might be needed. And if you can figure out a way to game play out, here's what I'm doing today. I'm seeing some signs. Maybe it's my customers telling me, maybe I went to a conference and I heard some things that worried me or whatever, that maybe I need to pivot my business. And maybe it's a little pivot, or maybe it's a major pivot. The problem is most businesses only pivot when what? When they break, when there's a crisis. Is this the ideal time to pivot? Would this work in college basketball or the NBA? No. So again, this is one of those where figuring out what are your super strengths, and maybe there's some things you can learn along the way, but making sure the people that you surround yourself with have some of the ability to at some point say, hey, boss, there might be an issue here. So I do a lot of speaking to university groups, wannabe young entrepreneurs, many of them who don't even exactly know what they're getting in store for. And a lot of those wannabe entrepreneurs, they want to be what? The Mark Zuckerberg. They want to be the leader. They want to be the one who gets out there and makes it big and gets on the cover of, Entrepreneur or Inc. magazine or whatever. And the reality, I try not to throw this, big bucket of ice water on them too much, but the reality is not everybody's cut out for that. And in fact, Mark Zuckerberg was just interviewed on one of the fastest growing business podcasts in the world that is sponsored by Spotify and JP Morgan Chase and several other entities. And he was interviewed about, would you do it the same way over again? And he basically said, no, I wouldn't put my family through that. Kind of remarkable. And guess what? The CEO of NVIDIA said exactly the same thing. And so the fact is that growing your own business is hard. And there's a lot of skill sets. Again, we're living in an age where you can figure stuff out better perhaps than 20 years ago, because there's just so many more tools available, so many more articles you can read, networking groups you can get involved with, podcasts that you can listen to. I mean, even the worst podcasts that I listen to, I usually get 1 or 2 nuggets out of those podcasts, even if half the podcast is annoying. If it gets too annoying, okay, I'll move to another podcast. But so let's talk about leadership for a second. When I say that not every person is cut out to be the owner, not every person is cut out to be a leader. What is more important in leadership, IQ or EQ, emotional intelligence. Study after study after study, and I will tell you that ours just checked the box right along. EQ is more important than IQ. Your ability to work with a team, your ability to work with other people, your ability to, I mean, how can you close different types of potential customers when you got 10 different flavors of customers? You know, they're not all just chocolate and vanilla. And you've got so many different shifting of the gears you have to do. And finding those people with great EQ skills is one of the things that our top ninjas, they put on their talent checklist, but they also look for their future leaders with that EQ. And here's a fun fact. My first book, CEO Road Rules, I co-wrote with an expert in the country on developing better EQ skills. And EQ can be learned. Now, it's helpful if you already got it in the DNA, but it can be learned. Now, there's some people that are so intensely anti-EQ that it might really annoy you just to try to get them in different training and get them to a point of great EQ. And again, it depends on their role in the company. But increasingly, you can't, you know, in the past, maybe somebody with really poor EQ, you could kind of set them off in a corner somewhere and maybe they're working on something where they don't have to interact with too many people. And there's still those jobs around. But increasingly, you got to have those good EQ skills. So it was interesting because one of the leaders of a major technology company in North Carolina and I were talking about the future of jobs as a result of AI and all the offshoots of it. And she said, you know, I'm really worried about my bottom 20% of my engineers because they don't have as good EQ skills as my top 20%. Now, if I told you the name of this company, you would say, oh boy, this company can hire the top 1% in the world of engineers, and she's worried about the bottom 20% not even having a job 5 years from now. That's the power not only of EQ, but also EQ in the techno-industrial revolution. Yeah. I'm sorry? Yeah, some, and some of our top ninjas definitely have above average IQ, but interestingly enough, they don't have super high IQ. They have, you know, just high enough and maybe so they don't get in their own way. You know, we've seen that often with, any engineers in the crowd? Okay, a few, yeah. We didn't pass out tomatoes, did we, at lunch? So don't throw them if you got them. But we see this happen more in engineers, is they attack every problem like it's an engineering problem as opposed to a people problem. And so again, the unique engineers are the ones who can play well on a team, have good common sense. You know, that's more of an EQ than an IQ, and they don't flaunt. If they've got a super high IQ, they don't flaunt it in front of everybody. No. All right. Technology. Technology is one of those things that most of our top ninjas, they want to be on the leading edge of adding technology to their company as they grow, but they don't want to be on the bleeding edge. So they're willing to experiment a little bit, but for the most part, they're taking it slow, but then they'll move fast when they're sure that a particular technology solution can help them do what? Do one of these, bring more customer joy or more employee joy. I will tell you that it's incredible to me how many private businesses that I've run into who have old generation technology. And when we interview the employees, they're like, oh yeah, we're like in the dark ages around here. And it's creating anti-joy. And the business owner somehow thinks that that isn't a problem. We've had a breakout in productivity since the pandemic, and the United States in particular has had a breakout in productivity that is pretty incredible. And again, techno-industrial revolution, PricewaterhouseCoopers and a whole variety of McKinsey and other entities say this is going to be a multiplier effect over the next 5 to 10 years. But you can only have productivity if you've got the right technology and people trained well on the right technology. And finally, speed. Now, again, there was an old adage that the average entrepreneur, their mantra was ready, fire, aim. So the concept was, and we teach this in some of the universities, is get out there with your product or your service and make sure the customer actually wants it. Not something you think they want or you think is cool, because that'll probably die, but something that the customer actually wants. And so that ability to fire fast and then iterate, be able to change the service or change the product or whatever, is pretty important. But the real key with speed today is knowing when to slow down and figure things out at an inflection point of your business. So for those of you, thinking about the growing side, more customers, there are all kinds of inflection points in the business where if you don't slow down, if you just press right through, you're going to have some unhappy customers. You're going to have fraying of the edges of your tapestry. And maybe it's not critical, but news travels fast among customers these days. Have you heard that? What they used to call the jungle drums, they were kind of slow and customers might not even know. Well, customers know today, like that, if something's not working right. So the speed piece, again, I suggest that you take a look in the book about how to use speed to your advantage. In my chess career, the way we did it, my original Cuban chess master who sat little 10-year-old version of me down and said, we're going to play 1,000 games, you're going to lose every one of them, but you're going to learn something from every game. 10-year-olds love to hear that, by the way. That sounded like so much fun. But it built character. It was helpful to me because one of the things that he taught me was you get to a certain point in the game, and at that point, maybe you take half the time off your clock to figure out the next move, because that's the key pivot point. Well, how do you know you got a pivot point if you're a brand new entrepreneur? You study other entrepreneurs. How do you study other entrepreneurs? Well, there's a few thousand books on entrepreneurism out there, but there's easier ways to do it beyond Blink and some of the things where you can get the essence of it. And again, I go back to many of these podcasts are great at learning lessons. In fact, the Acquired podcast, the one that I mentioned earlier, that's one of the fastest growing in the world right now, it's mostly about public companies. And so you might say, well, there's nothing relatable to that. Well, they always do the origin story of the person developing the public company. I always get at least 3 great nuggets for private business out of the origin story. So again, a lot of great tools that you have available now to be a better entrepreneur, to whatever it is that you're struggling with, figure it out better. So I think we're at the end of our time. Do we take some additional questions or? Okay. Or I get the hook.
If you- But if you're able to stick around for questions, Dennis would love to answer.
Thanks. Yeah,